go ahead and get started here. We'll let anyone else who wants to join us along the way. So thank you everyone for coming out on a summer night and joining us for this conversation. My name is Abby Ross. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for United Spinal Association. We're really happy to have you here with us for this conversation, and we hope it's going to be the first of actually many conversations about important issues that impact our members and the ways that we can talk about it together and learn together, give it space together, grow and really support one another. So it's very exciting that we're having this tonight. It's a new format for us. So thanks again for joining us. We are starting tonight with a discussion about race and disability and Black Lives Matter. I hope that most of you, if not all of you, had a chance to read the August issue of New Mobility. Our staff did a really wonderful job putting together a compilation of stories and lived experiences with the help of Alex Jackson and other folks. So we just wanted to continue that conversation here. And we have some wonderful folks tonight that are gonna help us with that conversation. And we're looking forward to learning and growing together tonight. I do want to take a moment here and introduce Carmen Jones, who is a real treasure for our organization. Carmen is our vice chair of our board of directors. She's been on the board of directors, I think, for 10 years, Carmen, maybe, and then the National Spinal Cord Injury Association, maybe 10 years before that. So it's a lot of years of investment in our community, in our organization, a lot of resources and energy and creativity and all kinds of wonderful things that we're very, very grateful for. So we're also grateful that you're going to be leading us and navigating us through this conversation tonight. And we do hope that that we can come away learning more and understanding lived experiences and seeing how we can support one another in a bigger way. So Carmen, go ahead and take it away from there.
Thank you so much, Abby. Hello, everyone. I am really excited to be with you all. I know the other panelists are as well. I want to applaud United Spinal and also New Mobility for even tackling this issue, because oftentimes in our community, in the disability community, we may skirt around or circumvent issues of race. And so I commend Jim Weissman's leadership and Abby for wanting to put this together. I guess I would deem this as a courageous conversation. That's a word I'm hearing shared a lot in corporate America. And it really is not always the easiest thing to talk about race, but I do believe, and I think the panelists would agree as well, that we begin to do better when we know better. Maya Angelou said that. And so in having just conversations that may typically be uncomfortable for folks, we learn and we grow. So this is our first effort to really try to tackle a topic, and the culture and all the social issues of the day really have sparked our discussion. With the latest shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and I heard today on the news that he now has a spinal cord injury. It's a relevant time. There's no opportunity for people of color to really rest and relax, because we're often victims in an unarmed way. And so I want to just get us kicked off, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists. We have James Ainsworth, Stefan Henry, and Andrea Levant here, and I would love for them to introduce themselves. They can share where they're from, and then a little bit about their disability, so you all know that we where we come from and what we have in common. So let me turn it over to Stefan.
Hi, my name is Stefan Henry. I live in New York. I'm a C5, C6 quadriplegic. I'm actually CEO of a company called Level the Curve, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you so much. Andrea?
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here today, Arizona, outside of Phoenix. And I have a strategy and communications firm that focuses on disability. And let's see, I'm also currently serving as the impact producer for Crip Camp, Netflix film executive produced by President Barack Obama. Excited to be here.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm hearing some background noise. So for those folks that are participating, if you could put your phone on mute, that would be great. All right, and then Mr. Ainsworth.
Hello, my name is James Ainsworth. I'm a T12 paraplegic. I'm a copywriter and a journalist.
Great. All right, so I have a series of questions. This will be real informal. We're going to ask that you keep your questions till the end, and then we'll be happy to answer them. So this is to all of the participants. Can you share a time when you were discriminated against? Open the floor. Stefan, I saw you unmute.
So, I don't know which one. I guess the more powerful one is I was once in a relationship with a South Asian girl, but I could never meet her family, mostly because I'm a Black man and because I wasn't white or brown. If they met me and they found out that we were in a relationship together, she would get disowned from her family, not even because of my disability, but because of the color of my skin. So that was a pretty big eye opener for even in like the realm of things that you can kind of be discriminated for. You sort of think that maybe my disability would take a little bit more of a lead in that, but still, being Black is more prominent. So it's that.
Thank you. James?
Sure. I wrote about this in my article on New Mobility. About 17 years ago, I went to visit a friend in 5 Points, Denver, Denver's urban inner city neighborhood. And I drove a Dodge Avenger at the time, and it was really quite cumbersome to transfer in and out. I had to take the wheelchair apart and pull it across me and put it into the passenger seat, and then take it out, put it back together and transfer into it and get on my way. So I went to visit this friend at his apartment, and there was no parking on the street. And I have chronic pain, so I didn't want to park 2 or 3 blocks away and try to wheel myself over to the apartment. I just wanted to see if my friend was home, and then I'd work out the parking later. So I pulled up on the grass next to the apartment complex, and I went in and went to the guy's place. He wasn't there. When I got back to my car, there was a motorcycle cop there, and he was hassling me about parking. And I tried to explain to him, hey, I've got a spinal cord injury. I have chronic pain. There's no parking on the block here. I don't want to park 3 blocks away and then try to wheel. And then he sneered at me and he said, "Are you talking back to me?" And it was a definite message in that sneer. It was, man, you say one more wrong thing and you're going to jail. And having a spinal cord injury, I didn't have much stomach for confrontation at that point, because I didn't want to end up in jail, not have catheters, not be able to take care of myself, possibly have my car impounded. And it's normally I have very little problems with police. I normally get along with everybody. I'm just not a confrontational kind of person. But this particular event was, it was really bold with, his hatred, and there was really not much I could do with it. So I just was quiet, and I just got in my car and I left. But what I said in my article is that for a Black person, you can be fine with 7 or 8 or 9 out of 10 interactions with police that are decent, respectful, and courteous. But that one bad apple out of 10, that one wrong encounter could be dangerous, harmful. It could cost you your life. We see now Jacob Blake has a spinal cord injury. We're lucky, supposedly, that he got shot 7 times, and we're lucky he's alive. And so for my white friends, I try to use that as an example for them to understand why there's a need for systemic reform. And we need certain protections out there. I think it's similar to what is needed in terms of societal reforms for dealing with the disabled, with disability, the disability community. So that's my experience.
Okay, thank you so much. Miss Andrea?
Yeah, so my story that I often tell is a little bit different, and it speaks to the employment side. And so the first job that I basically that was going to be the job to move me to Washington, D.C. from Nashville. It was a job that I applied for online and had interviewed for, and it was clear that they planned to interview over the phone. And we're cool with that. And I did a first interview, went really well, was invited for a second interview, and perhaps a third. And I remember on the last interview, the person that was interviewing said, we have to make a decision pretty quick because I am leaving to go out of town. And so we want so we'll, be back to you very quickly. And at this point, I hadn't disclosed my disability. I think that a lot of us have that, kind of experience of trying to decide when and how and all of those things. And this was admittedly 12, 13 years ago, or more even, 13 years ago. And I had a very different stance on disability. Now, people would know it up front, but I was nervous about it. And so I hadn't said anything about being disabled. And then after my last interview, I was kind of, what I'll say, convicted, and felt like, what, if I am letting them know about who I am as a person, to not tell them about my disability feels like I'm denying an aspect of myself. And if they want me and the qualities that I exhibit, I would say that many of those are related to, my experience as a disabled person. So I actually called them back and said, just wanted to let you know, and kind of said the same thing. I'm a wheelchair user. I was in the car at the time. I'm like, I'm driving right now. I'm, independent. Not that those things really matter when I look back, but just kind of trying to explain that doesn't, hinder my ability to do the job. But if you want me, I want you to know this aspect of who I am. And so I don't even know if it was 24 hours later, but I basically got an email saying, wait a second, we've decided that we're going to hold off on making the decision. First of all, what is it that it would take for you to, they started asking, well, our accessible bathroom is on a different floor, and I don't know if that would work. And, kind of tried to start coming up with excuses. And then they said, well, we're gonna wait till the person gets back from vacation and kind of see whether you can, let's bring you up to DC and chat some more. And I was really frustrated because I'm like, you weren't gonna bring me up to DC. You weren't worried, in essence, about well, you know, you couldn't trust that I know myself and my needs, and so you want to kind of check me out before you know, make a decision. And so I had to wait a few more weeks. Flew up to DC, met with them. Literally within hours, got a call saying that I got the job. Interestingly, I took the job. It was a job that took me to DC. But I always, you know, I knew that had it not been, like, it was very distinct, and that had it not been that I had disclosed my disability, that the process would have looked different. And some could say, you know, well, you know, they just wanted to be sure, but there's a tone, right, that we can kind of tell in an experience when you're more concerned or you're fearful or you don't really know what implications and kind of how much is this going to cost. And I felt like as soon as they saw that I was, quote unquote, whatever normal is, that made their decision for them. And so bittersweet experience, but it speaks in my world to kind of the pieces around discrimination and employment.
Okay. I guess for my part, I'll just offer two things. One, my first racial incident, I remember, and I didn't just share this in the beginning, I've been a wheelchair user for almost 34 years as a result of a car accident when I was in college. So, you know, I grew up on, you know, able-bodied up until 20, and so, or non-disabled, I should say. And my very first incident was in 1976 when my family moved into a neighborhood and I was in the 3rd grade. And we were the first Black family to desegregate the subdivision, and the neighbors sent around a petition for us to not move in. And so that left such a sting because you know, I was 9, 10 years old and I'd never heard the N-word. I was told things like, Stefan, you know, we can be friends at school or we can be friends, but you can't come home to my family and meet my family. So that was painful. And then my second experience was when I was in college and I was navigating trying to find a job. And I went to the interview. They did not know I was a wheelchair user before. There was no reason for them to know. And the recruiter was very uncomfortable. And she started scouring my resume, asking your strengths, your weaknesses, those typical questions. And then got towards the end and said, can you move your feet? What is your prognosis? And knowing what I know now, I would have sued that company, but you know, at that point, I was just trying to get a job. So I was going along to get along. So, you know, it can be very subtle. And if you don't have the confidence, those encounters can leave you very deflated and, you know, zap a lot of your will. All right, let's move along. I think we could spend the rest of the night talking about this.
I'd just like to add one quick thing in, if I may.
Sure.
Just a quick comment. Sometimes when my van isn't functioning, I catch Uber, and I'll do my grocery shopping with Uber, and some Uber drivers will see that I'm in a wheelchair and I've got these bags in my lap, and they'll just take off. But I'll catch the next Uber driver. So, I just wanted to add, you know, since we're talking about both the Black and the disabled, I wanted to add that.
I've had that happen too, Mr. Ainsworth. I've had that happen too. And when the driver does come up to get me, I say, that other guy missed out. I tip really well. All right, so second question.
Yeah.
Describe how you navigate the intersection of being Black and having a disability.
I don't know exactly how to answer that.
Okay.
You're really just operating as a double minority, right? So like being Black, sometimes you can feel invisible. If that makes sense, like you can be you're either too visible or not visible at all, right? Like you're either like everyone's friend and everyone loves you and like, hey, you're like the cool guy in the room, or like your opinion doesn't matter. And I feel like disability kind of plays out the same way, where you're extra special because you're the only one that's different in the room. But simultaneously, sometimes they just push you off in a corner because they don't know how to like take on your experience at all. So I just operate in the thought of like, if I have a thought or something that I have to express and it has to be expressed, me personally, I kind of consider myself a bit of a chameleon where I can kind of go into the room and be like, okay, I know how these people think, I know how these people talk. I will code switch, right? Like I will.
Can you define code switching?
I know what it means to me, but I don't know the literal definition. But I'll literally speak their language as opposed to how I would normally speak at home or normally speak with my friends. Like if I have to go into a room full of CEOs who are only speaking in terms of like accounting and numbers, then I switch my speak to only talking with accounting and numbers. If I'm with my boys on the street, I'll be like, hey, yo, what's up? All these, like all the slang and everything that you normally use that you can say the same things with, but only in one way will the people in the lecture room understand you.
Sure, sure. Thank you for that. Andrea, what about you? How do you navigate your intersectionality of being Black and disabled?
Well, I mean, it's interesting right now in the current climate, I think, versus, prior to. And I think that there's always a sense of other, and you're always trying to figure out, I'm kind of constantly trying to figure out based on the space that I'm in, what is the other that is standing out the most. So if I am at my predominantly Black church, or, and I won't say mine, but say I'm visiting a predominantly Black church, then I'm typically thinking, okay, I'm feeling awkward. It's likely disability, right? Because everybody else, skin color looks like me. If I go into a, primarily disability focused space, then and I'm feeling a little awkward, then I'm like, is it because I'm Black, right? And then out in the world in general, I and Carmen, I know we've talked about this before, and there kind of is, I think it depends on your experience, life experience, and whether, for me, I generally, because I've been a wheelchair user and have a significant disability that requires a pretty significant amount of support, and I use a power wheelchair, I'm generally thinking disability first if I was like kind of hierarchical in nature around if I'm being discriminated against. That's probably the first thing I think of. And yet, because, to Stefan's point, you're a minority in all the ways. Is it because I'm Black? Is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm disabled? I don't know. And so I find myself, I had a situation earlier today where I was assessing based on the other person and what they represent in terms of their demographic, what it could be, and based on how I was being treated. And I think that that's just a constant experience. It's like, which one is it? You can't really point unless it's incredibly blatant.
I totally wholeheartedly agree with Andrea. It really depends on the space. And because I'm in a lot of corporate spaces, I'm definitely the only disabled person with a visible disability. I'm definitely most likely the only person, one of a handful of people of color. I kind of do that scan first, and then, okay, for all of our attendees. So there's something that we talk about called like the Black glance, where you kind of nod or you acknowledge the other person's there. So okay, I've been in situations where I haven't gotten the Black glance back, and I'm like, okay, all right. But you just kind of acknowledge each other, and then, you go on with the meeting. It doesn't mean anything like you're gonna get a one up or anything like that, but it's just an acknowledgement that someone else is there and you're not the only one. So, third question, as a Black person, what has been your reaction to the social unrest related to George Floyd's murder? Now, let me say this. we Black folks on the web and the session, we have been having discussions amongst our friends and communities before. I think for me, the big stake in the ground took the wind out of me was Trayvon Martin, right? And you can remember like the incident where it totally wiped you out. You were gutted. Like, how could this be? So let me ask you this. So what's been your reaction to everything we see in the culture and as it relates to George Floyd's murder? Andrea, you want to go first?
I mean, you said it. It's like, this is not new. You know what I mean? And I can honestly say I've probably been more frustrated than anything, because it's not new, you know. And so the fact that we have a recorded incident isn't essentially what it seems to have taken. Not that there haven't been other recorded incidents, because I won't even start giving all of the names, but in this particular case, that is bringing attention in a different way. And so I'm glad that it's happening. I think from the very first day that there seemed to be, this attention all of a sudden. I think my biggest thing was, please let this not be, a fad, and let this not be, something our attention is given, in this moment and maybe for a few more months, but that it does cause some actual shifts at the highest of levels, and that we move beyond, quite frankly, what we're doing right here, which is having a conversation, and actually that there's some legwork, and I'm using that as a disabled person, saying that there's some work that is going to be done where people can actually, a year from now, we look back and actually see the difference that it made.
Right. Great. All right, Stefan, what about you?
Been a little bit angrier than normal, to be honest. There's something about seeing these videos over and over again now, and then it taking like a global pandemic and the economy shutting down and people literally spending the last like 3 minutes of their life crying for their mom. For everyone to be like, hey, racism is real, police brutality is real. And, I'm happy that everyone's coming to the forefront. I'm happy that a lot of people are joining the cause. I really just hope that people came along to it sooner.
Yeah. I agree. And I said to some of my white friends who were comfortable talking to me, did you think we were making this up? This is not fabricated. This is, in our community, this is what we know. And we have to have really different conversations with our children, with our sons. And it's painful because I hear mothers, I have a daughter, and I'm not as worried, but I'm still cautious. But I hear mothers, my friends who are mothers of boys, Black boys, and they say, I hold my breath and I pray until I hear the door open. And so this is just normal part of the culture, and it's not hyperbolic. I mean, if Tamir Rice, I mean, all of us can name 10 names, but if a 12-year-old boy playing with a gun, now I'm getting on a soapbox, at a park, got mistaken as adult and shot and killed, there's something wrong, not with that boy, he's being a kid. It's something wrong with the police and their reaction. And so, I'll get off that. Okay.
Yeah, too, trust me.
I would just say what the world reaction that everyone saw was the collective trauma of Black people, the anger, the pain, the microaggressions, all encapsulated and what you saw in the looting and in the marches, et cetera. So, okay. All right, let's shift gears a little bit because I know we're to touch on Black Lives Matter. So tell me your feelings or perspectives on Black Lives Matter. As a group, as a movement, tell me what your thoughts are. We'll start with you, Stefan.
All right, cool. As a movement, I feel like it's necessary. I think it's amazing in the sense of like, thank you everybody for getting like just involved energy wise and trying to do something to help stop this problem of police brutality. I think as a group, it can be a little bit better organized in terms of like having a message that's very succinct and clear about what specifically you're supporting. I get what they were trying to do with having like not one leader because of like the idea that like Martin Luther King, when he died, the civil rights movement fell apart or whatever. But simultaneously, the movement was falling apart already for different reasons. It wasn't really just Martin Luther King's death. And I feel like everything needs a leader, right? Like, I feel like the movement in general is amazing, but if we have a lead and we have a lead with clear goals, like we need to have police defunded or to like have like them regularly checked psychologically every month, have firearms checks every month, something, right? Like 4 or 5 things that we're really gonna ask for from this and push on from every leader in our system. That would be great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay. All right, Mr. Ainsworth, so can you share your perspectives or feelings on BLM?
Sure. I agree that we are in a historical moment. And I'm glad that there is a banner to unite. I mean, these protests have been worldwide. And it's astounding because there's oppression by color all across the planet. Here in Colorado, we passed a major police reform bill. It's been several weeks now. And in Colorado, we've removed police indemnity for actions taken while in uniform, while in work, etc. There have been there's mandatory body cams and other kinds of reforms. So the pressure is palpable, and it's important for the activists to be practical and pragmatic as well as to be on the streets. And I think we're in a moment where we can create a lot of change. Yeah. And but it's, we don't have a national police organization, like in South Africa, they have one national police service. And so it has to happen at state levels. It has to happen even on, there's the county level, and then there's the city police districts. So I think it's up to all of us to carry through with this banner. Some people detract from the name Black Lives Matter, but it's a unifying banner. And we're in a historical moment. And I think we've seen more change around these issues, institutional change, like with the NASCAR and Marine Corps banning Confederate flags and things like this. We've seen more change here in 2 or 3 months than we have in 30 years. So, it's just heartbreaking that we had to see a guy get choked to death in front of our eyes for people to wake up and say enough. Right. For white people to join in as well with us and to really demand change. So that's how I see it.
I'd give you a fist bump on that. Okay, Andre.
I have nothing more to add to that. That was great.
Okay, well then let me pivot. How do you feel when you hear people say all lives matter?
I think it's ridiculous. I think that I've heard, and I'll be honest and say I hear people say disabled lives matter, and I think that usurping, aiming to yet another, you know, um, attempt to detract from what's actually happening, and to say, to specifically point to the fact that, you know, what is happening in our world. And I've heard so many different analogies, you know, of people, you know, trying to really make it plain what Black Lives Matter means. You know, if my house is burning down and your house is in the whole street, but this is the one that's burning down, who are you going to give attention to? The one that's burning down, and it's Black Lives Matter, you know, all different types of analogies. But at the end of the day, it was a movement created by us for us, you know, and other people, allies to join. But ultimately, those other experiences aren't the same. And I have to quote a colleague and friend, Ola Ojawumi. We were on a panel a couple of weeks ago, and she said, and I haven't heard it said any better. She said, you know, the fact is that as a white person, you can still roll into, even if you're a wheelchair user, you can still roll into a Klans meeting, and then you should see the difference between Black Lives Matter and everything else. So it's not the same. It shouldn't be placed, you know, all lives matter. Me as a Black, you know, woman and Black disabled woman, my experience when I roll into a room is not the same as a white disabled peer. It's just not gonna be. I'm not gonna be treated the same way. And so we have to acknowledge that.
Okay. I had a person say to me, a white woman who also has a disability, after, you know, a lot of the marches, she said, I really wish disability got the same level of attention as Black Lives Matter. And I was like, oh, and I said, well, I think it would take seeing repeatedly disabled people killed and it being videotaped for people to take notice. And we don't want that. So, you know, that kind of pulled her back and she realized what she said, but I couldn't just let that go.
Yeah, white disabled people, because we're saying Black disabled people be killed. Yeah.
Right. This is true. This is true.
You know?
This is true. All right. Before I get to the last couple of questions, you know, there's a lot of talk about privilege, right? And what does that mean? And how do you explain that to your friends who are white? Real quickly, how do you all define privilege? If you're talking to one of your friends who's come to you and they want to understand what it means, a white friend, how do you describe it, Mr. Ainsworth?
Well, gosh,
Loaded question.
I have never been one that really liked that word.
Okay.
I've never really liked that word, and I don't get into many one-on-one kinds of conversations where I'm trying to explain, you know, Blackness and the difference between white privilege and so on. I'm just trying to be in the moment, I guess, with the bigger picture, you know, to be at the protests and to try to get people to focus on practical policy changes. You know, I was an activist. This is very interesting. You know, when I was in high school, we had an educational program that was an experiential education program. And one of the modules had to do with disability awareness and activism. This is in the 70s. And this was before I had my injury. I got my injury in 2002. And so I experienced, well, we had to go and be in wheelchairs, and we had to simulate blindness and a lot of different kinds of things to be aware. And I became an activist around disability issues in college. And I would say that the ADA, it's a similar kind of a thing. We need the broad systemic change. And I guess we're at a moment now where the issue is finally being forced and it's reckoned and people are in the streets, and hopefully with the election and with the continued activism, we'll get some kind of shift in society. Maybe we could have some kind of reparation or Truth and Reconciliation Commission or something to spark a national dialogue. But gosh, I don't use the word privilege very much in my discussions with people.
Okay. All right, Andrea.
I still use the word, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a presentation that talks about this, and it's basically the way we describe it is privilege is not having to notice. So it's, you know, when you never thought about the fact until you get up to a door and you see a wheelchair user that there's no button here. You know, we see people do that. Oh my God, there's not a ramp. Oh my gosh, there's not a button here, you know? And so the same for, you know, when it comes to, you know, white privilege, it's the same types of things. Well, you know, I never thought about the fact that I could, you know, there was the story going around, you know, oh, the guy, what was it? Like had taken something from the store or whatever, and it was no big deal, or some money or whatever. Like just things like that, that we could, you know, that Black, you know, males especially have to worry about, that white, you know, males have never thought anything about, like not having to pay attention or not having to notice. That's what privilege is.
Okay. All right, we got two more questions that I have, and then we have a bunch of questions that have come in. So I'm gonna land the plane soon. Okay, so what makes a good ally? Stefan, what do you think?
Someone who listens instead of talks. Someone who takes the time to actually do the research on their own, try to figure out what people are talking about when you're talking about systemic racism, when you're talking about history of racism, and try to understand their other people's views and teaches. On top of that, tell your family, correct that drunk uncle who's talking craziness at every barbecue. You know what I mean? Like, go to the rallies, do your best to help out. I think that's a good ally.
Yep. Andrea, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say what Stefan said. It's being quiet. I think it's not. It's passing the mic, and not just from an external perspective, but internally. So it's creating opportunities, offering opportunities, not for free, like paying people, you know, just, I mean, things like that, creating this basically where your privilege lies, it's passing that along to others.
Yep. Mr. Ainsworth?
Gosh, I really have much more to add.
Okay.
Those were good comments, so great comments.
The only thing I'll add quickly is the best, I've heard this and I liked it. An ally is the person who's vocal when the group or the person is being discussed in a room and they're not there and they're standing up for them. So that is a good ally. So if you look around your conference room table and you don't see a specific group of people that you're like, you know what, we should do better in that area, be the person to speak up and say something. All right, last question, and then we'll go to the questions. How can we help the disability community become more inclusive of people of color? So there are a lot of people with disabilities or chronic health conditions who are people of color, but I would say the disability leadership is not very diverse. How can we help advise the community to become more inclusive?
Literally go out of your way to do it, right? Like, you know, if you have a position that feels like it would talk to a lot of people, interview a lot of people of color and see if they can fit the role, you know what I mean? And just have them on your team, like, or at least have like a group of advisors that, like, whenever you do some sort of advertising or some sort of event, that you just kind of run through like some people of color who are wise before you go and put things out there.
Right. Okay, Andrea, do you have any thoughts? Thank you, Stefan.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, and because I'm getting asked this quite a bit, and it's hard right now because you have to be able to demonstrate authenticity
Yeah.
in a way that is, it's tricky because I think we all like know what's up, is what we would say. So like if we get a call right now in this current climate, like it's like, I know why you're, and so I think number one, right now you have to be comfortable with whatever the response is. You have to be willing to listen, and you have to be okay with us saying no, we're not interested, or just whatever it may be, because we're all processing in different ways. And I think it's creating jobs. I think it's creating, like I said, the opportunity beyond just, goodness knows, I think we receive so much. Well, it's an opportunity for exposure, that kind of thing, and we don't need exposure. Quite honestly, like we need the platforms, and we need to be not just at the table. And Anita Cameron talks about this. It's not just about being at the table, but it really is about being able to really be in positions of leadership, and stepping aside. And we've seen that in non-disabled spaces, right, of key leaders that are literally saying, you know what, I'm backing back to ensure that this, there's a position, this position can be, fulfilled by a person of color. And I think that the disability community should create spaces like that.
I would agree with you. And I think there has to be enough recognition that the table's big enough for everyone to pull up under it, and that if you give someone else an opportunity, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose out. That's a fallacy that a lot of people have in the when you have conversations about diversity, that, oh, well, I'm giving up something. I'm not doing that. I'm going to hold on tight because I don't want someone else to get it. So I'm going to move on to the question, since we have a number and I want to be respectful of the time. So we had a couple of comments, and Bill Furtick, who works for United Spinal, he asked, do the panelists feel that they remain open to continuing work with law enforcement to improve relations with communities of color, or rather are the panelists too frustrated to continue past levels of collaboration or not? Stefan, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have a choice. So I don't think they're going away anytime soon. Black people are going to keep living. I want more people to keep living. So we have to try and work with the police officers, no matter what.
Next question by Jen French. So many of us now have a higher sensitization of racism that is systemic and longstanding. Equality and behaviors need to change. What are your suggestions that the average person can do to change?
So I think there's a word in there that is what makes the difference, and that's equality versus equity, right? And so equality meaning like, okay, we all get the same exact thing. And the fact is that we all don't need the exact same thing, right? And I think, you know what I mean? And so I think it is being aware. Each person, there is no, and I say it when I do my disability inclusion work, and I say it here, there's no cookie cutter answer to this, you know what I'm saying, to what has come to the surface. And I think that it's asking a lot of questions. It's recognizing that just because you know one Black person or one Black disabled person, that our experiences, because we do come with different levels of, history. Carmen, I mean, we've all just said it here, right? Like I've had my disability my entire life. And so what my experience and what I bring into a space is gonna look different than, perhaps Carmen's experience or stuff. So I think that it's really, right now, it's just important to listen. That's what I would say, my advice would be, and not coming in with any preconceived notions other than what we know. And that is, there is blatant racism, and blatant ableism in this country today. And we, yeah, and creating a level playing field. And when we think about the disability rights movement, so grateful, and Mr. Ainsworth talked about it, like the ADA, and what it did is it helped us, you know, with the equality piece. But when it comes to this next level of like, of thinking about things from an intersectional perspective, we have to really embrace the idea that we're not all the same. And so
Yeah.
we need to listen.
Okay. All right, we have a question from Tim Gilmer, which is, I'm interested in anyone's experiences as a person with a disability at an HBCU. Also, is there a consensus among panelists on other Black attendees about which are the best HBCUs for accessibility and wheelchair culture?
That's Carmen.
Stefan, did you go to an HBCU?
I did not, so I'm sorry, I wish I could
All right.
help.
So for those who are attending, HBCU is a historically Black college that there are 107 HBCUs throughout the country. Now they're predominantly African American, sometimes started by abolitionists back in the 1800s, but it provided an opportunity for free slaves to get an education when they were free after being enslaved. And so I went to Hampton University, which is in Hampton, Virginia, and near Virginia Beach. I went to Hampton without a disability and had my car accident my junior year. You know, Tim, I don't know that there's, I think that the beauty of an HBCU is that it was, I mean, I've heard this of a lot of people, it is the only place, especially in your young development, where you can relax and you don't have to worry about, you're in a very supportive culture where your teachers, your professors, your friends are all cheering for you. There may be some issues of socioeconomic status or, you know, things like that, but race is not one of them. And so that I found for Hampton, it was like the heavens parted because I was the only Black person in my high school graduating class, and I needed to be in the majority for once in my life. So Hampton was a breath of fresh air. That said, you know, I don't know that there is a directory or some sort of document that really encapsulates what's best for wheelchair culture. I think that's one of those things that needs to be developed. And I think that for a lot of HBCUs, and I'll share this with you, Tim, when we talk a little further, that there's so many, HBCUs don't receive the same level of funding as predominantly white institutions. It's just a fact. And so while they are required to meet certain standards, a lot of resources are going towards scholarships and paying faculty and, you know, making the buildings maybe minimally accessible. In my case, Hampton went over and beyond for me, and I got injured before the ADA became law. So anyway, we can talk about that further. Let me go through this last couple of questions.
Can I just say something real quick to that? Sure. I was just gonna say that my parents went to HBCUs, and honestly, the reason why I did not was because, and specifically the one they went to, is because it wasn't like physically accessible. So I mean, and that was almost 20 years ago. So, you know, hopefully things have changed, but I definitely think that, yeah, there's work to be done. And like you said, though, it's around resources, so.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, Steve Lieberman said, according to the National Spinal Cord Injury Statistical Center, since 2015, nearly 24% of newly spinal cord injured Americans have been Black. That compares to 13% of the general population who are Black. How can institutional SCI focused and disability organizations ensure that we are properly centering and recruiting Black advocates in our work? I think we touched on this some. You got to be proactive. I mean, it's like any you have to be able to meet people where they are. I didn't enter the disability leadership with an independent living mindset as an advocate. I was just trying to get through doorways and in bathrooms and learning to drive. So, there may be a learning curve for folks, and we have to be comfortable as a community and not jam stuff down their throat that, they have this learning curve. And, some people may grasp it more quickly than others, but I would say just being proactive. Is there anything else that y'all would add to that? Okay. And then lastly, Brooke McCall, great conversation. I think a lot of discussion has been had around how to be strong allies to people of color. And I'd love to have you answer that question from your perspectives as Black disabled leaders. Additionally, what would be your advice for newly disabled Black peers dealing with newfound intersectional identities, good question, who feel overwhelmed and want to develop their voice and be heard? Stefan, do you have any thoughts? That's a good one.
It's a great one. I've always found just for disability in general, if you find an independent living center, there tends to be one in every state from what I remember.
Yep.
Go there, see what groups are around. I would go to the ones that are more centered around the urban neighborhoods. If you have that option, whatever that neighborhood looks like for you. One great one for us was Axis in Harlem, and tons of Black and brown people and white people too. And, there's a home for everybody. Just go to your independent living center, try to find it.
Yep. Andrea, you have anything?
Yeah, well, what I would say, one thing that it fits in this is just that also be okay with where you're at, kind of on the way to where you're going. And I know that the disability community sometimes can be a bit critical around people's perceptions of disability, specifically when it comes to the intersectional experiences. And I think it's important for us as disabled people, as those that work in disability focused organizations, to understand that these concepts, I have disability pride. Some people may not be, especially at, depending on where they're at, the concept of embracing disability and all of these different things, there's a process. And I think, so my advice to those of us on the other end is being, open to where people are at in their disability kind of identity journey, and not forcing some of these, I think, the principles and the things that we tend to push around. I love my some people may not be there. And I remember when I started out in the movement, I got so excited learning about disability history and Judy Heumann and all of this. And my boss brought me in and he was like, just know that not everybody's going to feel that way. And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to let that be the last word since we're over 8 o'clock and I want to be respectful. Thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you've learned something. This will be the first in a series of conversations. Thank you, Mr. Ainsworth, Andrea, and Stefan. You can look for United Spinal to have more of these conversations. And, as I said in the beginning, when we know better, we do better. And so this is just an opportunity for us to all grow and learn to be better and more supportive to each other. And I will turn this back over to Abby to formally close us out. Abby?
Thank you all so much. We really appreciate your conversation tonight and your candor and your wisdom. So thank you. And yeah, we'll keep you posted on further conversations. Have a great night, everyone.